January 17th, 1943. The wind cut across the snow-blanketed plains east of Kharkov. Frost clung to every surface, turning rifles, boots, and the tip of a lone artillery barrel into glistening shards of ice. Somewhere in the distance, a low, menacing rumble grew louder, rhythmic and unstoppable. The sound of 5 German Panzers rolling forward, their steel tracks gnawing at the frozen earth. In a narrow foxhole, a single Red Army gunner huddled, breath steaming in the frigid air. His fingers, numb and trembling, gripped the cold metal of his artillery piece. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet every order he had ever received demanded he hold the line. The horizon was a blur of armored silhouettes, their turrets sweeping side to side, searching for targets. He could not see them directly. Trees, ridges, and the deep snowdrifts obscured the tank's approach. But he could calculate. He could anticipate. Somewhere between the roar of engines and the crunch of ice beneath treads, he recognized a fleeting window, an opportunity that defied conventional tactics. A single thought anchored him. If I fire now, it could change everything. The frozen battlefield waited. History was about to pivot. By the winter of 1943, the Eastern Front had become a crucible of relentless combat. The German Wehrmacht, emboldened by earlier successes in Operation Barbarossa, had overextended across the vast steppes of the Soviet Union. Cities like Kharkov, Stalingrad, and Kursk were not merely points on a map. They were symbols of survival and national pride. The Red Army, battered but unbroken, had learned to endure bitter cold, punishing marches, and devastating air assaults, transforming adversity into a harsh education in resilience. The German advance in early January was spearheaded by armored divisions, with Panzer III and Panzer IV units forming the tip of the spear. These tanks were accompanied by mechanized infantry, artillery, and Luftwaffe support. Their objective was clear: cut through Soviet lines, encircle key positions, and force a collapse of defensive cohesion. Yet winter had become an unexpected adversary. Roads turned to ice, rivers froze only to crack under the weight of armored vehicles. Supply lines stretched thin over hundreds of kilometers. Even experienced crews found themselves navigating a terrain that favored ingenuity over brute force. Soviet forces, anticipating such thrusts, had fortified positions along likely armored approaches. Trenches, foxholes, and concealed artillery positions punctuated forests and ridges, often hidden beneath heavy snow. Each unit had been drilled in observation, camouflage, and indirect fire tactics, though shortages in ammunition and modern equipment posed significant challenges. On January 16, 1943, intelligence reported the imminent approach of a German armored column near a ridge overlooking a strategic crossroads. The ridge was heavily wooded, providing cover but limiting line of sight. Soviet command dispatched a small contingent of artillerymen to positions capable of engaging enemy armor from concealed angles. Among them was a young gunner, trained in conventional artillery methods, but possessing an unusual aptitude for observation and improvisation. His assignment was straightforward: hold the ridge at all costs, support infantry units, and delay the German advance until reinforcements arrived. Yet the battlefield was already chaotic. Reports indicated that German tanks had bypassed forward positions, exploiting gaps in reconnaissance. Patrols sent to observe the column had returned with fragmented accounts. 5 Panzers, advancing cautiously but with lethal intent, were approaching from a direction obscured by snowdrifts and woodland. Direct engagement seemed impossible. Terrain and weather conspired to prevent a clear shot. the artillerymen faced a dilemma familiar to many units on the Eastern Front. Act boldly and risk annihilation, or hold defensively and allow the enemy to dictate the pace of battle. Morale, too, hung in the balance. Soviet troops had endured the brutal winter of 1942, witnessing the destruction of Stalingrad's outer districts, the exhaustion of extended supply lines, and the horrors of mechanized warfare. Yet, there remained an unbroken resolve. Officers emphasized adaptability and ingenuity, encouraging gunners to exploit every feature of the terrain. Snowbanks, frozen ridges, and even the angle of sunlight on icy surfaces became potential tools. Training in artillery theory merged with battlefield intuition. Soldiers learned that the unpredictable winter landscape could, paradoxically, become an ally if approached creatively. The technological landscape also shaped the approaching confrontation. The Soviet 76.2 mm divisional gun, standard issue for field artillery units, had a maximum range of just over 13 kilometers. Its shells were capable of penetrating the thinner armor of early Panzer models, but struggled against frontal armor of reinforced tanks. Indirect fire, firing over obstacles without direct visual contact, was a common tactic, though rarely effective against mobile targets. Accuracy depended on calculation, experience, and a deep understanding of how terrain could influence trajectory. For gunners, every ridge, rock, and frozen mound presented both a challenge and an opportunity. As the German column drew closer, the stage was set for an extraordinary confrontation. A combination of weather, terrain, technological limitations, and human resolve converged in a single location. The ridge would not merely be a line on a map. It would become the proving ground for a method that defied conventional artillery doctrine. The wind howled across the open plains, carrying the distant growl of advancing tanks. In the snow-covered foxholes, the gunner and his comrades prepared themselves. Calculations were checked, angles measured, and the artillery piece readied. Every moment, every subtle shift in terrain, every tremor in the snow mattered. And in that frozen silence, history was waiting for one precise, audacious action to tilt the scales. The following morning, January 17, 1943, brought even harsher conditions. Temperatures had dropped to -25 degrees Celsius, and the wind carried sharp flakes of snow that stung exposed skin and froze exposed metal in seconds. Visibility remained low, and the advancing German Panzers were silhouettes, distorted by drifting snow and the undulating terrain. For the Soviet artillery units, these conditions were both a hindrance and a hidden advantage. The German crews, trained for open-field maneuvers, struggled to maintain formation on the uneven, snow-covered ground. The artillery contingent stationed on the ridge consisted of a mix of 76.2 mm divisional guns and a few heavier pieces. Each gunner had been trained to operate using standard line-of-sight engagement or pre-calculated coordinates. However, the peculiar challenge of unseen enemy tanks forced improvisation. Calculating indirect fire against moving targets was notoriously difficult, especially when the exact location of each tank was partially concealed by trees, snowdrifts, and ridges. Mistakes could be fatal. One misjudged angle could result in wasted shells, or worse, friendly casualties. Amid this tension, the young gunner recognized a peculiar feature of the terrain, a frozen embankment below the ridge that ran parallel to the advancing enemy path. Its smooth, icy surface could, in theory, deflect shells at predictable angles. It was unconventional thinking, bordering on the untested, yet in that frozen moment, it offered the only feasible method to strike targets without direct sight. The idea was audacious. Fire at the embankment in such a way that the shell would ricochet, altering its trajectory toward the approaching Panzers. This ricochet method, as it would later be described, required split-second timing, precise calculation, and absolute confidence in one's skill. The gunner's peers were skeptical. Artillery manuals warned against ricochet fire. The practice was considered dangerous, unreliable, and largely theoretical. Yet circumstances left no conventional option. The ridge was the final natural barrier before the crossroads, a critical juncture for both sides. If the Panzers broke through, the German column could exploit the gap and threaten Soviet rear positions. The stakes were immense, and improvisation became a necessity. At command level, the emphasis remained on patience and observation. Senior officers directed gunners to watch for signs of mechanica, noise, smoke plumes, or shadows that indicated enemy movement. Calculations were continually updated to account for the slope of the frozen ground, snow density, and ambient temperature, all of which influenced shell trajectory. Every artilleryman understood that even minor miscalculations could render the shot ineffective. Yet the alternative, inaction, would allow the Panzers to close in unopposed. Meanwhile, the German crews advanced with their own cautious strategies. Intelligence reports from scouts and aerial reconnaissance indicated Soviet artillery positions in the area, prompting the column to stagger formation, maintain intermittent cover behind trees, and use radio silence to reduce detection. Despite these precautions, the tank crews could not predict the ingenuity of the single gunner watching from the ridge. The tension was invisible, a quiet duel between anticipation and improvisation, human skill versus mechanical might. By mid-morning, the 1st Panzer crossed a low rise, still out of direct sight. The gunner adjusted his aim, relying on experience, intuition, and careful observation of the terrain. Every motion mattered: the angle of the gun, the charge of the shell, and the point of contact with the icy embankment. The rest of the Soviet unit watched in silent expectation, aware that this moment could determine the survival of the ridge and the safety of the strategic crossroads beyond. This convergence of harsh winter conditions, complex terrain, limited artillery capabilities, and the human element of improvisation created a unique battlefield. Conventional rules were suspended. The outcome depended not on sheer firepower alone, but on innovation, courage, and the ability to manipulate the environment in ways the manuals never accounted for. As the distant rumble of the Panzers grew louder, and the snow drifted in thin, icy curtains across the ridge, the gunner prepared to act. Every calculation had been considered, every factor weighed. The first shot, aimed not directly at the enemy but at the frozen embankment, would signal the opening of an extraordinary engagement, one that would defy doctrine and leave an indelible mark on the study of armored warfare. The stage was set. The Panzers approached, and the moment for ingenuity had arrived. The first perspective to consider is the human angle. On a frozen ridge east of Kharkov, the gunner was not a seasoned tank commander or a decorated officer. He was a soldier shaped by necessity and circumstance. His fingers were numb, his breath formed clouds in the frigid air, yet his mind was sharp, calculating, and precise. Fear was present, an undeniable force pressing against his chest. Yet it did not paralyze him. Instead, it focused him, refining instinct into measured action. Each movement was deliberate, adjusting the artillery's elevation, noting subtle shifts in snow, monitoring the distant silhouette of approaching armor. He was alone in the critical moment, though comrades flanked him in nearby foxholes, relying on his skill to buy time. In these conditions, human endurance became as vital as any artillery piece. Fatigue, cold, and isolation tested not just physical strength, but mental acuity. The gunner's ability to combine instinct, calculation, and courage under extreme stress exemplifies the profound role human agency played in shaping the course of battles, particularly on the unforgiving Eastern Front. Tactically, the engagement was unconventional. Artillery, typically reliant on line of sight or predetermined coordinates, was now tasked with intercepting mobile armored vehicles from a concealed position. The frozen embankment provided an unorthodox solution, a natural deflector capable of altering a shell's path. Conventional doctrine deemed such a tactic unreliable, yet the terrain made it feasible. The gunner had to anticipate not only the enemy's speed and formation, but also the complex physics of a shell bouncing off ice, factoring in angles, velocity, and the unpredictable elements of snow and frost. Indirect fire was risky. One miscalculation could result in wasted ammunition, or worse, catastrophic failure. By choosing this method, the gunner effectively turned the battlefield into a chessboard, using terrain and physics as his pieces. The tactical brilliance lay not in raw firepower, but in adaptability and creativity, exploiting the environment in ways the enemy could not predict. Technological considerations were equally critical. The Soviet 76.2 mm divisional gun, standard for field artillery units, was not designed for ricochet engagements. Its armor-piercing rounds could penetrate Panzer III and IV side plates at certain distances, but the gun's trajectory had to be nearly perfect to achieve the desired effect. Powder charges, shell weight, and barrel wear all influenced accuracy. The gunner had to reconcile these mechanical realities with the unpredictability of the ricochet. Every variable, from ice density to barrel temperature, had to be mentally calculated, a feat requiring both technical knowledge and battlefield intuition. While manuals provided theoretical guidance, the gunner's innovation transformed theory into practical, deadly action. His understanding of his weapon, combined with observation and rapid calculation, exemplifies how technology, when paired with human ingenuity, can defy conventional limitations. Leadership shaped the broader context in which the gunner operated. Soviet officers emphasized discipline and adherence to doctrine, but also recognized the value of initiative, particularly under extreme circumstances. Commanders on the ridge delegated responsibility, trusting artillery crews to make real-time adjustments as the enemy advanced. This balance between structured command and individual judgment was crucial. The gunner's decision to attempt indirect ricochet fire could have been dismissed as reckless under rigid leadership. Yet the environment demanded adaptive thinking. Officers nearby maintained communication, offering guidance and monitoring results. But they allowed room for improvisation, a recognition that in warfare, rigid adherence to procedure could be as dangerous as inaction. Leadership, in this moment, was as much about restraint as command. It provided the conditions for ingenuity to emerge. Morale intertwined with human courage and tactical decision-making. The ridge was not merely a position on the map. It was a symbol of resistance. Soldiers understood that the defense of this narrow, snow-covered high ground could delay the German advance, prevent encirclement, and protect vital supply routes. Each artilleryman felt the weight of responsibility, aware that failure could cost hundreds of lives. Yet, adversity also fostered determination. Observing the gunner's calm under pressure, his colleagues drew strength. The human spirit, resilient, focused, and inventive, became a force multiplier, transforming ordinary soldiers into agents capable of extraordinary outcomes. Morale, in this context, was not abstract. It was a tangible driver of precision, risk-taking, and coordination. Finally, the enemy's perspective offers a distinct angle. German tank crews, confident in armored superiority, advanced cautiously, relying on reconnaissance and formation discipline. They had encountered Soviet artillery before, but rarely with such ingenuity. The unseen threat of ricochet fire created uncertainty, disrupting their expectations and forcing split-second reactions. Each maneuver, each slight adjustment in speed or formation, was influenced not by direct observation, but by instinctive caution, an acknowledgement of the unpredictable human element hidden in the snow-covered ridge. In effect, the gunner's actions imposed psychological pressure, demonstrating that battlefield advantage often extends beyond raw firepower to encompass perception, anticipation, and the unseen influence of ingenuity. These intersecting angles, human endurance, tactical innovation, technological mastery, adaptive leadership, morale, and enemy perception, set the stage for the extraordinary moment to come. Each factor, examined individually, contributes to a fuller understanding of how a single soldier, armed with observation, skill, and courage, could turn a conventional artillery engagement into an unprecedented battlefield event. The first shots had yet to be fired, but every calculation, every observation, and every decision was already in motion, converging toward a decisive moment that would test all these elements simultaneously. Continuing the examination of this extraordinary engagement, the second section of angles highlights additional perspectives that shaped the outcome. From the enemy angle, the German Panzer crews operated with the confidence of mechanized dominance. Panzer III and IV models were battle-tested, their armor and firepower designed to overwhelm infantry and light artillery. Yet their experience had been built on predictable scenarios, open fields, visible targets, and coordinated support from infantry and air units. In this encounter, the ridge and its frozen embankment introduced an unforeseen variable. The German crews could not see the artillery, nor could they easily anticipate how indirect fire could strike them from unconventional angles. The uncertainty introduced a subtle, psychological pressure, slowing decision-making and forcing adjustments to formation and pace. While they maintained discipline, the hidden threat created an invisible tension, a silent reminder that human ingenuity could rival mechanical superiority. The moral angle offers a more introspective perspective. Warfare on the Eastern Front was brutal and often impersonal, yet this engagement forced the gunner to confront the ethics of his actions in real time. He was not firing directly at visible targets, but manipulating physics to strike unseen. The act required mental detachment from the immediate human consequences while simultaneously maintaining extreme focus. Each shell that ricocheted toward the advancing Panzers carried lethal force, and each impact could destroy crews unaware of the danger until the moment of collision. This moral complexity, the balance between duty and the act of taking life indirectly, underscores a recurring truth of war. Soldiers often face decisions that challenge both instinct and conscience. The gunner's focus on precision and survival reflects a disciplined ethical navigation, even amid extreme conditions. A second tactical angle lies in the broader coordination of Soviet units on the ridge. While the gunner executed ricochet fire, nearby artillery crews and infantry provided indirect support, observing smoke plumes, adjusting ranges, and reporting enemy movements. This coordination transformed individual ingenuity into collective effectiveness. The ridge became a network of observation and action, where each soldier contributed to the overall tactical objective. The gunner's unconventional method was most effective because it was integrated into this network, demonstrating how localized innovation could amplify broader operational strategy. The human brain, working in concert with simple mechanical systems and environmental understanding, became as decisive as the tanks themselves. Technological aims. Adaptation is also central to understanding this event. The 76.2 mm gun, designed for straightforward engagements, was pushed beyond its intended operational parameters. The gunner had to estimate shell speed, angle of incidence, and rebounding trajectory with precision, using mental calculations rather than mechanical aids. Every variable, temperature, ice density, snow accumulation, shell weight, could alter the outcome. By exploiting the interaction between shell and terrain, the gunner effectively redefined the practical capabilities of his equipment. This moment illustrates how technology in warfare is not static. Human ingenuity continually stretches mechanical boundaries, turning limitations into advantages. Leadership once again plays a subtle yet vital role. Senior officers on the ridge understood the potential consequences of the engagement. They had trained gunners in both conventional and creative tactics, emphasizing adaptability when rigid methods failed. By delegating responsibility and trusting individual judgment, leadership created the conditions for innovation. The gunner's decision to attempt ricochet fire would not have been feasible in an environment dominated by strict procedural oversight. Leadership, in this context, is less about issuing orders than enabling capability, an acknowledgement that extreme conditions often require extraordinary autonomy. Finally, the psychological impact on the broader battlefield cannot be understated. The German crews, confronted with the unpredictable effects of ricochet fire, experienced confusion and hesitation. Each tank hit by an unseen projectile created a ripple effect, forcing the column to slow, reorient, and attempt evasive maneuvers. Meanwhile, Soviet troops observing the results felt a surge of confidence and morale. The action became a tangible demonstration that creativity and courage could offset numerical or technological disadvantage. The gunner's method, while tactical in immediate effect, also carried a symbolic significance. It represented the capacity of human intellect to shape outcomes, even against formidable mechanized forces. In sum, the second section of Angles deepens the understanding of the engagement. It examines the enemy perspective, the moral and psychological dimensions of combat, broader tactical integration, technological adaptation, and leadership dynamics. Each element, considered individually, highlights a facet of how a single soldier's ingenuity intersected with terrain, technology, and human perception to produce an unprecedented result. These angles converge to reveal that the upcoming moment, the execution of the ricochet method, was not simply a test of marksmanship. It was the culmination of human courage, tactical innovation, technological adaptation, and the complex interplay of battlefield psychology. Every calculation, observation, and decision now prepared the gunner for the decisive sequence that would unfold in the next phase of combat. The stage was set. The snow drifted lightly across the ridge. Engines rumbled in the distance. Every element, the human, the technological, the tactical, the moral, aligned in anticipation. The moment of execution, the climax of both ingenuity and risk, had arrived. January 17th, 1943, late morning. The frozen ridge was silent, except for the wind and the distant, rhythmic rumble of 5 German Panzers advancing toward the crossroads below. Visibility remained limited. Snow drifted in thin, icy curtains, partially obscuring their dark silhouettes. The gunner, alone in his foxhole, took a steadying breath Every calculation, angle, powder charge, point of impact on the embankment, had been checked multiple times. The moment for action had arrived. He adjusted the artillery piece with meticulous precision. The 76.2 mm shell rested in the breech, its weight both reassuring and heavy with consequence. Drawing on years of training and instinct honed by countless drills, he aimed not at the tanks themselves, but at the frozen embankment positioned strategically below. This surface, unbroken and slick with ice, would serve as a deflector, redirecting the shell's trajectory toward the approaching Panzers. A conventional officer might have dismissed the plan as reckless. Yet the gunner had observed the terrain carefully, noted the slight angles of the slope, and understood how the laws of physics could work to his advantage. The first shot rang out, the echo bouncing off distant ridges. The shell struck the ice at a calculated angle. A fraction of a second later, the projectile rebounded, striking the side of the leading Panzer. There was no dramatic explosion, but the impact was lethal. Armor plating buckled under the precision of the Ricochet, tracks were damaged, and the crew inside experienced the sudden chaos of being attacked from an unseen source. The remaining tanks paused, hesitating as their formation wavered. The effect was instantaneous: confusion, delay, and vulnerability. Encouraged, the gunner readied a second shell. He recalculated, factoring in the slight shift of the first Panzer and the subtle change in distance caused by uneven terrain. Another shot, another precise ricochet, found its mark. The second Panzer erupted in a cloud of smoke and ice shards. Nearby infantry, who had been observing the ridge, felt a surge of hope. The impossible was now in motion. The German crews inside the remaining tanks struggled to comprehend what had happened. Their visibility was limited, their radio communication constrained by snow interference, and the unseen artillery created a level of unpredictability that even disciplined crews could not fully manage. Time slowed as the gunner continued. Each shell was a calculation of physics, timing, and human instinct. Observation was critical. Smoke, track patterns, and the subtle movement of snow informed minute adjustments. By now, the first two tanks were effectively neutralized, immobilized, or destroyed. The remaining three, still advancing, were forced to spread out, cautious, hesitant to maintain formation. This dispersion, while necessary to avoid unseen fire, increased their vulnerability. The tactical brilliance of the Ricochet method became evident. Conventional artillery tactics relied on direct engagement or pre-calculated fire against stationary or slow-moving targets. Here, the gunner exploited both the environment and the predictability of human armored maneuvers. He transformed the frozen embankment into an extension of his weapon, converting a natural feature into a force multiplier. Each shot was deliberate, precise, and calculated, requiring not only skill but extraordinary composure under extreme pressure. As the third shell was loaded, the gunner's attention to minute detail intensified. The snow beneath the gun shifted slightly, the ice gleamed differently in the intermittent sunlight, and the Panzers adjusted their approach. Every factor was observed, and every variable accounted for. The shell struck the ice at a slightly altered angle, rebounding into the third Panzer. Armor failed at a critical seam. The tank shuddered violently. Crew casualties were severe. The remaining two Panzers now faced not only the gunner's artillery, but also the psychological weight of their immobilized comrades. Hesitation slowed their advance further, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. By mid-morning, the gunner had destroyed 3 of the 5 tanks using nothing more than calculation, instinct, and terrain. His technique demonstrated the convergence of human ingenuity and technological adaptation, showing that creativity could overcome even heavily armored mechanized forces. Each shot was a testament to the principle that innovation, when applied with precision and courage, could defy conventional expectations. Meanwhile, Soviet infantry observed the effect with awe. The ridge, once a simple defensive position, had become the site of an unprecedented display of artillery skill. Morale surged. Reports would later note the psychological impact on the German forces: hesitation, confusion, and the realization that they were facing an unseen adversary capable of manipulating both terrain and physics in lethal ways. The final two Panzers were now within range, but their crews had adjusted, trying to anticipate the unseen threat. The gunner, calm and methodical, calculated the minor adjustments required for these last targets. Snow, ice, angle, and distance were all considered. Each shell was loaded and fired with unwavering focus. One ricochet struck the 4th Panzer, disabling its main gun and tracks. The 5th and final tank, attempting evasive maneuvers, was immobilized by a precise shot that hit an exposed seam, leaving it unable to advance. By late morning, all 5 Panzers were neutralized. The ridge, defended by a single artillery gunner using an unconventional method, had held. The German advance was halted. The crossroads remained under Soviet control, and the battlefield had witnessed an extraordinary convergence of human skill, tactical innovation, and environmental exploitation. The moment was decisive. The gunner's ricochet method, once theoretical, had been executed flawlessly. The frozen ridge, the snow-laden embankment, and the advancing Panzers formed a complex tableau in which ingenuity triumphed over conventional expectations. In that moment, the dynamics of armored warfare were challenged, and the human element, creativity under pressure, proved decisive. The ridge now held, yet the implications of this engagement were only beginning to ripple across the battlefield. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the broader consequences for strategy, morale, and the understanding of artillery tactics were just emerging. After neutralizing the first 3 Panzers, the gunner faced the remaining 2 with unflinching focus. These final tanks, though fewer in number, presented new challenges. The surviving crews were now alert, scanning the ridge for any sign of artillery, communicating rapidly via radio, and attempting evasive maneuvers. They had witnessed the destruction of their comrades without understanding the source. This heightened awareness made the gunner's task more complex. Timing and precision were now even more critical. He recalculated the trajectories, accounting for slight deviations caused by ice and snowdrift. The frozen embankment remained his ally, a natural deflector that allowed him to engage targets that were otherwise obscured. The first shell toward the 4th Panzer struck true. It glanced off the ice and hit the side armor, incapacitating the tank's tracks. The vehicle ground to a halt, crew members scrambling to assess damage. The German column faltered. Hesitation spread like a contagion among the remaining units. Every second of delay was an advantage for the Soviet defenders, amplifying the effect of the gunner's method beyond raw destruction. The 5th Panzer approached more cautiously, attempting to adjust its trajectory to avoid the unseen threat. The gunner observed its movement carefully, tracking subtle changes in speed and orientation. His calculations had to factor in not only the anticipated path of the tank, but also the unpredictable variables introduced by ice density, snowbanks, and the angle of the embankment. Each adjustment required mental precision under extreme stress. One miscalculation could allow the tank to advance, threatening the ridge and surrounding units. The shot was fired. The shell struck the ice at the exact calculated angle and ricocheted directly into the final Panzer. Armor fractured, internal mechanisms were damaged, and the crew experienced sudden chaos. The last tank came to a standstill. In under an hour, 5 armored vehicles, symbols of mechanized might, had been neutralized by a single gunner using ingenuity, physics, and environmental awareness. This sequence of events demonstrated a rare confluence of factors: human courage, tactical innovation, technological understanding, and exploitation of terrain. Conventional artillery doctrine had never envisioned such a method being employed in combat against mobile, armored targets. Yet the gunner's actions transformed theory into reality. The frozen embankment became a weapon, the ridge a strategic advantage, and a single soldier the fulcrum upon which the engagement pivoted. The immediate tactical impact was clear. The German column halted, re-evaluating its approach and retreating to reassess the threat. Soviet forces seized the opportunity to reinforce the ridge, secure key positions, and consolidate their defenses. Communication lines were established to prevent future surprise attacks, and reconnaissance units were dispatched to monitor enemy movement. The gunners' success provided a temporary but critical reprieve, allowing the Red Army to maintain control over the strategic crossroads and prevent potential encirclement. Equally significant was the psychological effect on both sides. For Soviet soldiers, witnessing the destruction of 5 Panzers by a single gunner elevated morale, instilling confidence in the effectiveness of ingenuity over sheer firepower. For the German crews, the event introduced uncertainty, fear, and the recognition that conventional tactics could be outmaneuvered by unseen forces. The encounter demonstrated that human skill, observation, and adaptability could alter the outcome of mechanized warfare, even when facing numerically and technologically superior forces. The aftermath of the engagement also underscored the importance of precision under pressure. The gunner had relied on rigorous calculation, observation, and rapid decision-making. Minor errors could have resulted in wasted ammunition, or worse, catastrophic failure, including damage to friendly positions or injury to himself and nearby comrades. The success of the Ricochet method was therefore not merely a product of chance, but of disciplined execution under extreme conditions. Strategically, this engagement forced a re-evaluation of both offensive and defensive doctrines. Soviet artillery units began to consider the potential of indirect and unconventional methods for engaging armored threats, while German commanders recognized the vulnerability of mechanized units to hidden, highly skilled opponents. Lessons learned from this encounter would influence tactical training, emphasizing observation, improvisation, and environmental exploitation as critical components of battlefield effectiveness. By midday, the ridge was secure. Smoke from the destroyed Panzers drifted across the snow-covered field, mingling with the frozen fog of early winter. Infantry units moved cautiously, securing wreckage and observing the surrounding terrain for additional threats. The gunner remained at his post, calm and focused, ensuring that the ridge held. While the immediate danger had passed, the implications of his actions would resonate far beyond the battlefield, demonstrating the profound impact of ingenuity, courage, and adaptability in warfare. The climax of this engagement was not a simple victory of firepower. It was a triumph of human intellect and composure over seemingly insurmountable odds. The frozen ridge, once a mere defensive position, had become a stage for an extraordinary demonstration of artillery innovation. The gunner's method, executed with precision and courage, had neutralized 5 heavily armored Panzers without direct line of sight, an achievement that would be analyzed, studied, and remembered as a defining moment of tactical ingenuity during the Eastern Front campaign. As the German column retreated and Soviet forces secured the ridge, the focus began to shift. Immediate tactical success gave way to broader questions of strategy, morale, and the lessons of battlefield improvisation. The events of that morning had not only halted an armored advance, but had also reshaped understanding of what was possible when human skill and creativity intersected with technology and terrain. The stage was now set for examining the aftermath, how this remarkable engagement affected soldiers, commanders, and the wider course of the conflict. The frozen ridge east of Kharkov stood quiet after the engagement, smoke curling from the wrecked Panzers and snow dusted over the shattered tracks and splintered armor. The immediate impact was unmistakable. The German armored advance had been halted, the crossroads remained under Soviet control, and a single artillery gunner had achieved what entire units had struggled to accomplish. Casualty reports from the German side later confirmed that all 5 tanks were destroyed or immobilized, with crew losses significant, though exact numbers remained uncertain due to scattered survivors retreating under fire. The engagement had inflicted both material and psychological damage. For Soviet forces, the effect on morale was immediate and profound. Infantry units stationed near the ridge experienced a renewed sense of confidence, observing the tangible results of one soldier's precision and ingenuity. Soldiers who had previously doubted the effectiveness of their artillery witnessed the destructive potential of disciplined calculation and environmental mastery. Propaganda channels would later highlight this engagement as an example of Soviet ingenuity and courage, though the gunner himself remained largely anonymous in official reports. Nevertheless, within the ranks, his actions were recounted as a model of ingenuity under extreme conditions. Strategically, the engagement had broader implications. The destruction of the 5 Panzers delayed the German advance by several hours, providing Soviet command with a critical window to reposition units and reinforce adjacent sectors. This pause allowed artillery and infantry formations to consolidate, and it disrupted the coordinated timing of the German mechanized thrust. While the encounter did not single-handedly alter the course of the Eastern Front, it demonstrated the potential for individual initiative to influence larger operations. Commanders on both sides would later analyze the incident, considering the lessons of terrain exploitation, indirect fire, and unpredictability in planning future maneuvers. The effectiveness of the Ricochet method had immediate operational significance. Soviet artillery units recognized that environmental factors, such as frozen embankments, ridges, and snowdrifts, could be leveraged creatively to engage armored targets previously thought to be safe from indirect fire. This recognition led to adaptations in training protocols, emphasizing observational skills, terrain analysis, and rapid calculation under pressure. While not a standard tactic, the engagement inspired confidence that unconventional methods, when executed precisely, could offset numerical or technological disadvantages. German forces, meanwhile, faced both tangible and intangible consequences. The loss of 5 Panzers represented a notable reduction in armored capability for the immediate sector, forcing the unit to rely on slower, less coordinated infantry movements until replacements arrived. More insidious, however, was the psychological effect on Panzer crews. Soldiers who survived the encounter reported a heightened sense of vulnerability, an awareness that unseen forces could strike with devastating effect. Officers noted that even disciplined, experienced crews became hesitant when navigating terrain that might conceal indirect artillery threats. The engagement underscored a critical lesson in armored warfare. Technological superiority alone could not guarantee success. When human ingenuity and terrain manipulation were factors, Reinforcement movements reflected the strategic adjustments resulting from the Ridge engagement. Soviet units extended observation posts, placed additional artillery in concealed positions, and coordinated with infantry to prevent future breakthroughs. German command, on the other hand, revised operational plans for armored columns, placing greater emphasis on reconnaissance and the identification of concealed artillery. This encounter demonstrated the interplay between small unit tactics and broader operational planning, highlighting how localized events could influence decisions across the front. The human element remained central to understanding the aftermath. The gunner, physically exhausted but mentally alert, continued to operate his artillery piece until reinforcements arrived. His focus and composure under extreme stress had been decisive, illustrating the importance of individual skill in high-stakes scenarios. Fellow artillerymen observed and supported his actions, but the success ultimately rested on one soldier's capacity to integrate observation, calculation, and improvisation under pressure. In doing so, he embodied a principle repeatedly proven on the Eastern Front, that adaptability and human ingenuity could, in critical moments, outweigh numerical superiority or technological advantage. Contemporary reports would later emphasize the significance of this engagement as a study in artillery innovation. Military analysts noted that the combination of terrain analysis, indirect fire, and psychological effect on enemy crews provided lessons for both defensive and offensive operations. While the gunner's Ricochet method would not become standard doctrine, it influenced tactical thinking, encouraging commanders to consider unconventional solutions to armored threats. In many ways, the Ridge engagement became a reference point for understanding the potential of improvisation in the broader context of mechanized warfare. The Ridge itself became a symbol. Snow-dusted and scarred by artillery and shell fragments, it bore silent testimony to the interplay of human skill, environmental exploitation, and mechanized vulnerability. Observers noted that the landscape, often treated as passive terrain, had become an active participant in the battle. Rocks, ice, and embankments had shaped outcomes as decisively as steel and gunpowder. For the soldiers who survived the engagement, and for the officers who studied it afterward, the lesson was clear. Battlefield conditions, if understood and manipulated effectively, could redefine conventional expectations of combat. The initial aftermath concluded with the Ridge held, German forces temporarily delayed, and Soviet units reinforced and reorganized. The engagement demonstrated the critical intersection of human ingenuity, tactical acumen, and environmental exploitation. While the larger campaign continued unabated, the events of that morning highlighted the profound impact a single soldier could have, providing both immediate operational advantage and enduring tactical lessons for commanders and analysts alike. As the dust settled and smoke drifted across the Ridge, the broader consequences of the engagement began to emerge. Soviet command formally documented the incident, noting the unusual method employed by the gunner and the effectiveness of ricochet fire against armored targets. While the gunner himself remained largely anonymous in official dispatches, his actions were studied extensively in training sessions and after-action reports. The event demonstrated that individual initiative, when applied with precision and courage, could create tactical opportunities that conventional doctrine might overlook. On the German side, the loss of 5 Panzers prompted both tactical and strategic reevaluation. Commanders analyzed the approach of the column, noting the vulnerability of tanks advancing without comprehensive reconnaissance of terrain features that could be exploited by hidden artillery. Reports emphasized the psychological impact on crews who became increasingly cautious when navigating wooded ridges or snow-covered embankments. This encounter reinforced a long-standing lesson in armored warfare. Technology alone cannot guarantee success, when human ingenuity and environmental factors introduce unpredictability. Soviet units quickly adapted lessons from the Ridge engagement. Artillery crews were trained to recognize the potential of terrain-based indirect fire, considering angles of ricochet, slope of embankments, and natural cover as tactical tools. Observation skills were emphasized, alongside rapid calculation under pressure. While ricochet firing was not codified as standard practice, it became a reference point in artillery manuals and field exercises, illustrating the effectiveness of improvisation when conventional methods were insufficient. Infantry units were briefed on the psychological and tactical advantages of supporting artillery with concealment and observation, reinforcing the integrated nature of battlefield operations. Morale across the Soviet forces saw a measurable boost. Witnessing the destruction of superior German armor by one gunner instilled confidence that ingenuity could compensate for material disadvantages. Soldiers recounted the engagement as an example of courage and creativity triumphing over mechanized might, and the story circulated informally among units as a motivational tale. The gunner's composure and precision under extreme conditions became emblematic of the resilience and adaptability that the Red Army sought to cultivate. Engagement also had ripple effects in German operational planning. While the immediate sector was temporarily halted, command issued directives emphasizing reconnaissance, flanking security, and the identification of hidden artillery positions. Armored units were instructed to exercise greater caution when advancing through terrain that could conceal indirect fire. This incident reinforced the importance of intelligence, terrain analysis, and anticipation in mechanized operations, highlighting that even experienced crews could be vulnerable when faced with innovative adversaries exploiting environmental factors. From a technological standpoint, the event illustrated the latent capabilities of standard artillery when combined with human ingenuity. The 76.2 mm gun, typically limited in engagement by line-of-sight constraints, was effectively employed against mobile targets through calculated indirect fire. Observers and analysts recognized that the gun's potential could extend beyond traditional limitations when operators adapted to the unique characteristics of the battlefield. This insight would inform both training and tactical experimentation in subsequent operations, emphasizing that creativity in weapon employment could yield disproportionate results. Leadership evaluation further underscored the significance of individual initiative. Commanders on the Ridge allowed room for improvisation, trusting the gunner to act decisively under extreme stress. This delegation of responsibility, combined with disciplined observation and coordination, facilitated the engagement's success. The episode highlighted a recurring theme in military history. Effective leadership is not solely about issuing orders, but about creating conditions in which skilled personnel can innovate and respond to unforeseen challenges. The physical aftermath of the Ridge was stark. Wrecked tanks, shattered tracks, and scattered debris bore silent witness to the encounter. Snow covered the scarred landscape, but the marks of battle remained evident, a testament to the convergence of terrain, human ingenuity, and mechanical force. Infantry and artillery units worked to secure the area, remove unexploded shells, and assess the viability of the Ridge for continued defense. Reports noted that the frozen embankment, once a simple feature of the landscape, had become an active participant in the battle, a force multiplier enabling one soldier to influence the outcome significantly. Finally, the long-term lessons of this engagement extended beyond immediate tactical gains. Military analysts and historians would later examine the incident as an example of unconventional problem-solving under pressure, emphasizing the interplay of observation, calculation, and innovation. The gunner's method, while not universally applicable, demonstrated the importance of adaptability, risk assessment, and the exploitation of environmental features in warfare. The engagement served as both a case study in artillery innovation and a reminder of the enduring impact of individual courage on the battlefield. By the close of the day, the ridge had been secured, German forces temporarily stalled, and Soviet positions reinforced. The immediate threat was neutralized, but the significance of the encounter endured. It illustrated how a single soldier, equipped with skill, focus, and ingenuity, could alter the tactical landscape, influence enemy psychology, and leave a lasting mark on operational doctrine. In the frozen plains east of Kharkov, human determination, ingenuity, and courage had turned the tide of a localized engagement, creating a moment that would echo far beyond its immediate impact. The events on the frozen ridge east of Kharkov stand as a stark testament to the power of human ingenuity in warfare. Amid the relentless machinery of the Eastern Front, tanks, artillery, and armored columns, a single artillery gunner demonstrated that intellect, observation, and courage could shape outcomes in ways that raw firepower alone could not. The Ricochet method he employed was not merely an innovative tactic, it was a manifestation of adaptability under extreme pressure. A convergence of physics, terrain, and human skill that challenged conventional military thinking. This engagement underscores a broader truth about war. While technology defines the tools of conflict, it is human decision-making that determines their effect. Each shell fired, each calculation made under biting cold, each moment of hesitation or decisiveness contributed to a sequence of events that reshaped the immediate battlefield. The gunner's actions disrupted a mechanized advance, preserved strategic positions, and imposed psychological weight on an enemy trained to expect dominance. In doing so, he revealed how individual initiative could magnify the effectiveness of a larger force and influence outcomes disproportionate to one person's role. The frozen ridge also illuminates the interplay between environment and strategy. Snow, ice, and embankments, features often treated as obstacles, were transformed into tactical assets. This adaptability highlights the importance of understanding and exploiting terrain, reinforcing that battlefields are not neutral stages but active participants in the dynamics of warfare. Human ingenuity can bend the constraints of nature to strategic advantage when observation, calculation, and creativity intersect. Beyond tactics and technology, the engagement serves as a reminder of the human dimension of combat. Fear, focus, and determination coexist in the same instant. Soldiers must navigate both physical danger and moral responsibility. The gunner's precision under pressure exemplifies resilience and discipline, qualities that shape history in moments when stakes are highest. Ultimately, the destruction of 5 Panzers without direct line of sight is more than a tale of battlefield innovation. It is a story of intellect and courage, prevailing over machinery and convention, of adaptability transforming adversity into opportunity, and of the enduring truth that even in the vast, brutal machinery of war, human skill remains decisive. On that frozen ridge, history witnessed how one individual, armed with knowledge and audacity, could redefine what was possible in combat, leaving a lesson for generations of soldiers and strategists to follow.